testimonial or job recommendation for a person. The least generalized characteristics of a person are called secondary traits. Traits such as likes mangoes or prefers ethnic clothes are examples of secondary traits. While Allport acknowledged the influence of situations on behavior, he held that the way a person reacts to given situations depends on her or his traits, although people sharing the same traits might express them in different ways. Allport considered traits more like intervening variables that occur between the stimulus situation and response of the person. This meant that any variation in traits would elicit a different response to the same situation. Cattell, personality factors. Raymond Cattell believed that there is a common structure on which people differ from each other. This structure could be determined empirically. He tried to identify the primary traits from a huge array of descriptive adjectives found in language. He applied a statistical technique called factor analysis to discover the common structures. He found 16 primary or source traits. The source traits are stable, and are considered as the building blocks of personality. Besides these, there are also a number of surface traits that result out of the interaction of source traits. Cattell described the source traits in terms of opposing tendencies. He developed a test, called 16 Personality Factor Questionnaire, 16PF, for the assessment of personality. This test is widely used by psychologists. Eysenck's theory. H.J. Eysenck proposed that personality could be reduced into two broad dimensions. These are biologically and genetically based. Each dimension subsumes a number of specific traits. These dimensions are 1. Neuroticism versus emotional stability. It refers to the degree to which people have control over their feelings. At one extreme of the dimension, we find people who are neurotic. They are anxious, moody, touchy, restless, and quickly lose control. At the other extreme lie people who are calm, even-tempered, reliable, and remain under control. 2. Extraversion versus introversion. It refers to the degree to which people are socially outgoing or socially withdrawn. At one extreme are those who are active, gregarious, impulsive, and thrill-seeking. At the other extreme are people who are passive, quiet, cautious, and reserved. In a later work, Eysenck proposed a third dimension, called psychoticism versus sociability, which is considered to interact with the other two dimensions mentioned above. A person who scores high on psychoticism dimension tends to be hostile, egocentric, and antisocial. Eysenck Personality Questionnaire is the test which is used for studying these dimensions of personality. The trait approach is very popular and many advances in this respect are taking place. These are beyond the scope of your present studies. A new formulation has also been advanced that provides a novel scheme of organizing traits. This new formulation is given in Box 2.2. Psychodynamic approach. This is a highly popular approach to studying personality. This view owes largely to the contributions of Sigmund Freud. He was a physician, and developed this theory in the course of his clinical practice. Early in his career he used hypnosis to treat people with physical and emotional problems. He noted that many of his patients needed to talk about their problems, and having talked about them, they often felt better. Freud used free association, a method in which a person is asked to openly share all the thoughts, feelings, and ideas that come to her or his mind, dream analysis, and analysis of errors to understand the internal functioning of the mind. Levels of consciousness. Freud's theory considers the sources and consequences of emotional conflicts and the way people deal with these. In doing so, it visualizes the human mind in terms of three levels of consciousness. The first level is conscious, which includes the thoughts, feelings, and actions of which people are aware. The second level is preconscious, which includes mental activity of which people may become aware only if they attend to it closely. The third level is unconscious, which includes mental activity that people are unaware of. According to Freud, the unconscious is a reservoir of instinctive or animal drives. It also stores all ideas and wishes that are concealed from conscious awareness, perhaps because they lead to psychological conflicts. Most of these arise from sexual desires which cannot be expressed openly and therefore are repressed. People constantly struggle to find either some socially acceptable ways to express unconscious impulses, or to keep those impulses away from being expressed. Unsuccessful resolution of conflicts results in abnormal behavior. Analysis of forgetting, mispronunciations, jokes, and dreams provide us with a means to approach the unconscious. Freud developed a therapeutic procedure, called psychoanalysis. The basic goal of psychoanalytic therapy is to bring the repressed unconscious materials to consciousness, thereby helping people to live in a more self-aware and integrated manner. Structure of personality. According to Freud's theory, the primary structural elements of personality are three, i.e. id, ego, and superego. They reside in the unconscious as forces, and they can be inferred from the ways people behave, see Figure 2.2. Let us remember that id, ego, and superego are concepts, not real physical structures. We will discuss these terms in some detail. Id, it is the source of a person's instinctual energy. It deals with immediate gratification of primitive needs, sexual desires, and aggressive impulses. It works on the pleasure principle, which assumes that people seek pleasure and try to avoid pain. Freud considered much of a person's instinctual energy to be sexual, and the rest is aggressive. Id does not care for moral values, society, or other individuals. Ego, it grows out of id, and seeks to satisfy an individual's instinctual needs in accordance with reality. It works by the reality principle, and often directs the id towards more appropriate ways of behaving. For example, the id of a boy, who wants an ice cream cone, tells him to grab the cone and eat it. His ego tells him that if he grabs the cone without asking, he may be punished. Working on the reality principle, the boy knows that the best way to achieve gratification is to ask for permission to eat the cone. Thus, while the id is demanding, unrealistic, and works according to pleasure principle, the ego is patient, reasonable, and works by the reality principle. Superego. The best way to characterize the superego is to think of it as the moral branch of mental functioning. The superego tells the id and the ego whether gratification in a particular instance is ethical. It helps control the id by internalizing the parental authority through the process of socialization. For example, if a boy sees and wants an ice cream cone and asks his mother for it, his superego will indicate that his behavior is morally correct. This approach towards obtaining the ice cream will not create guilt, fear, or anxiety in the boy. Thus, in terms of individual functioning, Freud thought of the unconscious as being composed of three competing forces. In some people, the id is stronger than the superego, in others, it is the superego. The relative strength of the id, ego, and superego determines each person's stability. Freud also assumed that it is energized by two instinctual forces, called life instinct and death instinct. He paid less attention to the death instinct and focused more on the life, or sexual, instinct. The instinctual life force that energizes the id is called libido. It works on the pleasure principle, and seeks immediate gratification. Ego defense mechanisms. According to Freud, much of human behavior reflects an attempt to deal with or escape from anxiety. Thus, how the ego deals with anxiety largely determines how people behave. Freud believed that people avoid anxiety mainly by developing defense mechanisms that try to defend the ego against the awareness of the instinctual needs. Thus, defense mechanism is a way of reducing anxiety by distorting reality. Although some defense against anxiety is normal and adaptive, people who use these mechanisms to such an extent that reality is truly distorted develop various forms of maladjustment. Freud has described many different kinds of defense mechanisms. The most important is repression, in which anxiety-provoking behaviors or thoughts are totally dismissed by the unconscious. When people repress a feeling or desire, they become totally unaware of that wish or desire. Thus, when a person says, "I do not know why I did that," some repressed feeling or desire is expressing itself. Other major defense mechanisms are projection, denial, reaction formation, and rationalization. In projection, people attribute their own traits to others. Thus, a person who has strong aggressive tendencies may see other people as acting in an excessively aggressive way towards her or him. In denial, a person totally refuses to accept reality. Thus, someone suffering from HIV/AIDS may altogether deny her, his illness. In reaction formation, a person defends against anxiety by adopting behaviors opposite to her or his true feelings. A person with strong sexual urges, who channels her or his energy into religious fervor, presents a classical example of reaction formation. In rationalization, a person tries to make unreasonable feelings or behavior seem reasonable and acceptable. For example, when a student buys a set of new pens after doing poorly in an examination, she or he may try to rationalize her or his behavior by asserting, "I will do much better with these pens." People who use defense mechanisms are often unaware of doing so. Each defense mechanism is a way for the ego to deal with the uncomfortable feelings produced by anxiety. However, Freud's ideas about the role of defense mechanisms have been questioned. For example, his claim that projection reduces anxiety and stress has not found support in several studies. Stages of personality development. Freud claims that the core aspects of personality are established early, remain stable throughout life, and can be changed only with great difficulty. He proposed a 5-stage theory of personality, also called psychosexual development. Problems encountered at any stage may arrest development, and have long-term effect on a person's life. A brief description of these stages is given here. Oral stage. A newborn's instincts are focused on the mouth. This is the infant's primary pleasure-seeking center. It is through the mouth that the baby obtains food that reduces hunger. The infant achieves oral gratification through feeding, thumb-sucking, biting and babbling. It is during these early months that people's basic feelings about the world are established. Thus, for Freud, an adult who considers the world a bitter place probably had difficulty during the oral stage of development. Anal stage. It is found that around ages 2 and 3 the child learns to respond to some of the demands of the society. One of the principal demands made by parents is that the child learns to control the bodily functions of urination and defecation. Most children at this age experience pleasure in moving their bowels. The anal area of the body becomes the focus of certain pleasurable feelings. This stage establishes the basis for conflict between the id and the ego, and between the desire for babyish pleasure and demand for adult, controlled behavior. Phallic stage. This stage focuses on the genitals. At around ages 4 and 5 children begin to realize the differences between males and females. They become aware of sexuality and the sexual relationship between their parents. During this stage, the male child experiences the Oedipus complex, which involves love for the mother, hostility towards the father, and the consequent fear of punishment or castration by the father. Oedipus was a Greek king who unknowingly killed his father and then married his mother. A major developmental achievement of this stage is the resolution of the Oedipus complex. This takes place by accepting his father's relationship with his mother, and modeling his own behavior after his father. For girls, the Oedipus complex, called the Electra complex after Electra, a Greek character, who induced her brother to kill their mother, follows a slightly different course. By attaching her love to the father, a girl tries to symbolically marry him and raise a family. When she realizes that this is unlikely, she begins to identify with her mother and copy her behavior as a means of getting, or sharing in, her father's affection. The critical component in resolving the Oedipus complex is the development of identification with the same-sex parents. In other words, boys give up sexual feelings for their mothers and begin to see their fathers as role models rather than as rivals. Girls give up their sexual desires for their father and identify with their mother. Latency stage. This stage lasts from about 7 years until puberty. During this period, the child continues to grow physically, but sexual urges are relatively inactive. Much of a child's energy is channeled into social or achievement-related activities. Genital stage. During this stage, the person attains maturity and psychosexual development. The sexuality, fears and repressed feelings of earlier stages are once again exhibited. People learn to deal with members of the opposite sex in a socially and sexually mature way. However, if the journey towards this stage is marked by excessive stress or overindulgence, it may cause fixation to an earlier stage of development. Freud's theory also postulates that as children proceed from one stage to another stage of development, they seem to adjust their view of the world. Failure of a child to pass successfully through a stage leads to fixation to that stage. In this situation, the child's development gets arrested at an earlier stage. For example, a child who does not pass successfully through the phallic stage fails to resolve the Oedipal complex and may still feel hostile toward the parent of the same sex. This failure may have serious consequences for the child's life. Such a boy may come to consider that men are generally hostile, and may wish to relate to females in a dependable relationship. Regression is also a likely outcome in such situations. It takes a person back to an earlier stage. Regression occurs when a person's resolution of problems at any stage of development is less than adequate. In this situation, people display behaviors typical of a less mature stage of development. Post-Freudian approaches. A number of theorists further developed their ideas following Freud. Some had worked with him and then moved on to develop their own versions of the psychoanalytic theory. These theorists have been called neo-analytic, or post-Freudian in order to differentiate their work from Freud's. These theories are characterized by less prominent roles to sexual and aggressive tendencies of the id and expansion of the concept of ego. The human qualities of creativity, competence, and problem-solving abilities are emphasized. Some of these theories are briefly described here. Carl Jung, Aims and Aspirations. Jung worked with Freud in his early stages of career, but later on he broke away from Freud. Jung saw human beings guided as much by aims and aspirations as by sex and aggression. He developed his own theory of personality, called analytical psychology. The basic assumption of his theory is that personality consists of competing forces and structures within the individual, that must be balanced, rather than between the individual and the demands of society, or between the individual and reality. Jung claimed that there was a collective unconscious consisting of archetypes or primordial images. These are not individually acquired, but are inherited. The god or the Mother Earth is a good example of archetypes. They are found in myths, dreams and arts of all mankind. Jung held that the self strives for unity and oneness. It is an archetype that is expressed in many ways. He devoted much of his efforts to the study of such expressions in various traditions. According to him, for achieving unity and wholeness, a person must become increasingly aware of the wisdom available in one's personal and collective unconscious, and must learn to live in harmony with it. Karen Horney, Optimism. Horney was another disciple of Freud who developed a theory that deviated from basic Freudian principles. She adopted a more optimistic view of human life with emphasis on human growth and self-actualization. Horney's major contribution lies in her challenge to Freud's treatment of women as inferior. According to her, each sex has attributes to be admired by the other, and neither sex can be viewed as superior or inferior. She countered that women were more likely to be affected by social and cultural factors than by biological factors. She argued that psychological disorders were caused by disturbed interpersonal relationship during childhood. When parents' behavior toward a child is indifferent, discouraging, and erratic, the child feels insecure and a feeling called basic anxiety results. Deep resentment toward parents or basic hostility occurs due to this anxiety. By showing excessive dominance or indifference, or by providing too much or too little approval, parents can generate among children feelings of isolation and helplessness which interfere with their healthy development. Alfred Adler, Lifestyle and Social Interest. Adler's theory is known as individual psychology. His basic assumption is that human behavior is purposeful and goal-directed. Each one of us has the capacity to choose and create. Our personal goals are the sources of our motivation. The goals that provide us with security and help us in overcoming the feelings of inadequacy are important in our personality development. In Adler's view, every individual suffers from the feelings of inadequacy and guilt, i.e. inferiority complex, which arise from childhood. Overcoming this complex is essential for optimal personality development. Erich Fromm, The Human Concerns. In contrast to Freud's biological orientation, Fromm developed his theory from a social orientation. He viewed human beings as basically social beings who could be understood in terms of their relationship with others. He argued that psychological qualities such as growth and realization of potentials resulted from a desire for freedom, and striving for justice and truth. Fromm holds that character traits personality develop from our experiences with other individuals. While culture is shaped by the mode of existence of a given society, people's dominant character traits in a given society work as forces in shaping the social processes and the culture itself. His work recognizes the value of positive qualities, such as tenderness and love in personality development. Erik Erikson, Search for Identity. Erikson's theory lays stress on rational, conscious ego processes in personality development. In his theory, development is viewed as a lifelong process, and ego identity is granted a central place in this process. His concept of identity crisis of adolescent age has drawn considerable attention. Erikson argues that young people must generate for themselves a central perspective and a direction that can give them a meaningful sense of unity and purpose. Psychodynamic theories face strong criticisms from many quarters. The major criticisms are as follows. 1. The theories are largely based on case studies. They lack a rigorous scientific basis. 2. They use small and atypical individuals as samples for advancing generalizations. 3. The concepts are not properly defined, and it is difficult to submit them to scientific testing. 1. Freud has used males as the prototype of all human personality development. He overlooked female experiences and perspectives. Behavioral approach. This approach does not give importance to the internal dynamics of behavior. The behaviorists believe in data, which they feel are definable, observable, and measurable. Thus, they focus on learning of stimulus-response connections and their reinforcement. According to them, personality can be best understood as the response of an individual to the environment. They see the development simply as a change in response characteristics, i.e., a person learns new behaviors in response to new environments and stimuli. For most behaviorists, the structural unit of personality is the response. Each response is a behavior, which is emitted to satisfy a specific need. As you know, all of us eat because of hunger, but we are also very choosy about foods. For example, children do not like eating many of the vegetables, e.g., spinach, pumpkin, gourds, etc., but gradually they learn to eat them. Why do they do so? According to the behavioral approach, children may initially learn to eat such vegetables in anticipation of appreciation, reinforcement, from their parents. Later on they may eventually learn to eat vegetables not only because their parents are pleased with this behavior, but also because they acquire the taste of those vegetables, and find them good. Thus, the core tendency that organizes behavior is the reduction of biological or social needs that energize behavior. This is accomplished through responses, behaviors that are reinforced. From your study in Class 11, you may recall that there are several different learning principles that involve the use of stimuli, responses, and reinforcement in different ways. The theories of classical conditioning, Pavlov, instrumental conditioning, Skinner, and observational learning, Bandura, are well known to you. These theories view learning and maintenance of behavior from different angles. The principles of these theories have been widely used in developing personality theories. For example, observational learning theory considers thought processes extremely important in learning, but these find almost no place in classical or instrumental conditioning theories. Observational learning theory also emphasizes social learning, based on observation and imitation of others, and self-regulation, which again is missed out in other theories. Activity 2.3. Observe and note your behavior characteristics and those of your friends that have been imbibed from popular youth icons. Cultural approach. This approach attempts to understand personality in relation to the features of ecological and cultural environment. It proposes that a group's economic maintenance system plays a vital role in the origin of cultural and behavioral variations. The climatic conditions, the nature of terrain of the habitat and the availability of food, flora and fauna, in it determine not only people's economic activities, but also their settlement patterns, social structures, division of labor, and other features such as child rearing practices. Taken together, these elements constitute a child's overall learning environment. People's skills, abilities, behavioral styles, and value priorities are viewed as strongly linked to these features. Rituals, ceremonies, religious practices, arts, recreational activities, games and play are the means through which people's personality gets projected in a culture. People develop various personality, behavioral qualities in an attempt to adapt to the ecological and cultural features of a group's life. Thus, the cultural approach considers personality as an adaptation of individuals or groups to the demands of their ecology and culture. Let us try to understand these aspects with a concrete example. As you know, a good proportion of the world's population, even today, lives in forests and mountainous regions with hunting and gathering, economic activities, as their primary means of livelihood. The Burur, a tribal group, of Jharkhand represents such a population. Most of them live a nomadic life, which requires constant movement in small bands from one forest to another in search of game and other forest products, e.g., fruits, roots, mushrooms, honey, etc. In the Burur society, children from an early age are allowed enormous freedom to move into forests and learn hunting and gathering skills. Their child socialization practices are also aimed at making children independent, do many things without help from elders, autonomous, take several decisions for themselves, and achievement-oriented, accept risks and challenges such as those involved in hunting from an early age of life. In agricultural societies, children are socialized to be obedient to elders, nurturant to youngsters, and responsible to their duties. Since these behavioral qualities make people more functional in agricultural societies, they become dominant features of people's personality in contrast to independence, autonomy and achievement, which are more functional, and thus highly valued, in hunting-gathering societies. Because of different economic pursuits and cultural demands, children in hunting-gathering and agricultural societies develop and display different personality patterns. Humanistic approach. The humanistic theories are mainly developed in response to Freud's theory. Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow have particularly contributed to the development of humanistic perspective on personality. We will briefly examine their theories. The most important idea proposed by Rogers is that of a fully functioning person. He believes that fulfillment is the motivating force for personality development. People try to express their capabilities, potentials and talents to the fullest extent possible. There is an inborn tendency among persons that directs them to actualize their inherited nature. Rogers makes two basic assumptions about human behavior. One is that behavior is goal-directed and worthwhile. The second is that people, who are innately good, will almost always choose adaptive, self-actualizing behavior. Rogers' theory grew out of his experiences of listening to patients in his clinic. He noted that self was an important element in the experience of his clients. Thus, his theory is structured around the concept of self. The theory assumes that people are constantly engaged in the process of actualizing their true self. Rogers suggests that each person also has a concept of ideal self. An ideal self is the self that a person would like to be. When there is a correspondence between the real self and ideal self, a person is generally happy. Discrepancy between the real self and ideal self often results in unhappiness and dissatisfaction. Rogers' basic principle is that people have a tendency to maximize self-concept through self-actualization. In this process, the self grows, expands and becomes more social. Rogers views personality development as a continuous process. It involves learning to evaluate oneself and mastering the process of self-actualization. He recognizes the role of social influences in the development of self-concept. When social conditions are positive, the self-concept and self-esteem are high. In contrast, when the conditions are negative, the self-concept and self-esteem are low. People with high self-concept and self-esteem are generally flexible and open to new experiences, so that they can continue to grow and self-actualize. This situation warrants that an atmosphere of unconditional positive regard must be created in order to ensure enhancement of people's self-concept. The client-centered therapy that Rogers developed basically attempts to create this condition. You are already familiar with the hierarchy of needs propounded by Maslow. From your study of motivation in Class 11, Maslow has given a detailed account of psychologically healthy people in terms of their attainment of self-actualization, a state in which people have reached their own fullest potential. Maslow had an optimistic and positive view of man who has the potentialities for love, joy, and to do creative work. Human beings are considered free to shape their lives and to self-actualize. Self-actualization becomes possible by analyzing the motivations that govern our life. We know that biological, security, and belongingness needs, called survival needs, are commonly found among animals and human beings. Thus, an individual's sole concern with the satisfaction of these needs reduces him to the level of animals. The real journey of human life begins with the pursuit of self-esteem and self-actualization needs. The humanistic approach emphasizes the significance of positive aspects of life. See Box 2.3. Assessment of personality. To know, understand, and describe people is a task in which everybody is involved in day-to-day life. When we meet new people, we often try to understand them and even predict what they may do before we interact with them. In our personal lives, we rely on our past experiences, observations, conversations, and information obtained from other persons. This approach to understanding others may be influenced by a number of factors that may color our judgment and reduce objectivity. Hence, we need to organize our efforts more formally to analyze personalities. A formal effort aimed at understanding personality of an individual is termed as personality assessment. Assessment refers to the procedures used to evaluate or differentiate people on the basis of certain characteristics. The goal of assessment is to understand and predict behavior with minimum error and maximum accuracy. In assessment, we try to study what a person generally does, or how she or he behaves, in a given situation. Besides promoting our understanding, assessment is also useful for diagnosis, training, placement, counseling, and other purposes. Psychologists have tried to assess personality in various ways. The most commonly used techniques are psychometric tests, self-report measures, projective techniques, and behavioral analysis. These techniques are rooted in different theoretical orientations, hence they throw light on different aspects of personality. You have read about psychometric tests in the previous chapter. We will discuss the other methods. Self-report measures. It was Allport who suggested that the best method to assess a person is by asking her or him about herself, himself. This led to the use of self-report measures. These are fairly structured measures, often based on theory, that require subjects to give verbal responses using some kind of rating scale. The method requires the subject to objectively report her or his own feelings with respect to various items. The responses are accepted at their face value. They are scored in quantitative terms and interpreted on the basis of norms developed for the test. Some of the well-known self-report measures are briefly described below. The Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, MMPI. This inventory is widely used as a test in personality assessment. Hathaway and McKinley developed this test as a helping tool for psychiatric diagnosis, but the test has been found very effective in identifying varieties of psychopathology. Its revised version is available as MMPI-2. It consists of 567 statements. The subject has to judge each statement as true, or false, for her, him. The test is divided into 10 subscales, which seek to diagnose hypochondriasis, depression, hysteria, psychopathic deviate, masculinity, femininity, paranoia, psychasthenia, schizophrenia, mania, and social introversion. In India, Malik and Joshi have developed the Jodhpur Multiphasic Personality Inventory, JMPI, along the lines of MMPI. Eysenck Personality Questionnaire, EPQ. Developed by Eysenck, this test initially assessed two dimensions of personality, called introverted, extroverted, and emotionally stable, emotionally unstable. These dimensions are characterized by 32 personality traits. Later on, Eysenck added a third dimension, called psychoticism. It is linked to psychopathology that represents a lack of feeling for others, a tough manner of interacting with people, and a tendency to defy social conventions. A person scoring high on this dimension tends to be hostile, egocentric, and antisocial. This test is also widely used. 16 Personality Factor Questionnaire, 16PF. This test was developed by Cattell. On the basis of his studies, he identified a large set of personality descriptors, which were subjected to factor analysis to identify the basic personality structure. You will learn about this statistical technique later. The test provides with declarative statements, and the subject responds to a specific situation by choosing from a set of given alternatives. The test can be used with high school level students as well as with adults. It has been found extremely useful in career guidance, vocational exploration, and occupational testing. Apart from the few popular tests which use self-report technique which have been described above, there are several others that try to assess specific dimensions of personality, e.g., authoritarianism, locus of control, optimism, etc. As you proceed further with your study of psychology, you will come to know more about them. The self-report measures suffer from a number of problems. Social desirability is one of them. It is a tendency on the part of the respondent to endorse items in a socially desirable manner. Acquiescence is another one. It is a tendency of the subject to agree with items, questions irrespective of their contents. It often appears in the form of saying yes to items. These tendencies render the assessment of personality less reliable. It is also necessary to sound a note of caution at this stage. Remember that psychological testing and understanding personality requires great skill and training. Unless you have acquired these to an optimum level under careful supervision of an expert, you should not venture into testing and interpreting the personality of your friends who do not study psychology. Projective techniques. The techniques of personality assessment described so far are known as direct techniques, because they tend to rely on information directly obtained from the person who clearly knows that her or his personality is being assessed. In these situations, people generally become self-conscious and hesitate to share their private feelings, thoughts, and motivations. When they do so, they often do it in a socially desirable manner. The psychoanalytic theory tells us that a large part of human behavior is governed by unconscious motives. Direct methods of personality assessment cannot uncover the unconscious part of our behavior. Hence, they fail to provide us with a real picture of an individual's personality. These problems can be overcome by using indirect methods of assessment. Projective techniques fall in this category. Projective techniques were developed to assess unconscious motives and feelings. These techniques are based on the assumption that a less structured or unstructured stimulus or situation will allow the individual to project her or his feelings, desires, and needs onto that situation. These projections are interpreted by experts. A variety of projective techniques have been developed. They use various kinds of stimulus materials and situations for assessing personality. Some of them require reporting associations with stimuli, e.g., words, ink blots, some involve story writing around pictures, some require sentence completions, some require expression through drawings, and some require choice of stimuli from a large set of stimuli. While the nature of stimuli and responses in these techniques vary enormously, all of them do share the following features. 1. The stimuli are relatively or fully unstructured and poorly defined. 2. The person being assessed is usually not told about the purpose of assessment and the method of scoring and interpretation. 3. The person is informed that there are no correct or incorrect responses. 4. Each response is considered to reveal a significant aspect of personality. 5. Scoring and interpretation are lengthy and sometimes subjective. Projective techniques are different from the psychometric tests in many ways. They cannot be scored in any objective manner. They generally require qualitative analyses for which a rigorous training is needed. In the following pages, some of the well-known projective techniques are briefly discussed. The Rorschach ink blot test. This test was developed by Hermann Rorschach. The test consists of 10 ink blots. 5 of them are in black and white, 2 with some red ink, and the remaining 3 in some pastel colors. The blots are symmetrical in design with a specific shape or form. Each blot is printed in the center of a white cardboard of about 7/10 size. The blots were originally made by dropping ink on a piece of paper and then folding the paper in half, hence called ink blot test. The cards are administered individually in 2 phases. In the first phase, called performance proper, the subjects are shown the cards and are asked to tell what they see in each of them. In the second phase, called inquiry, a detailed report of the response is prepared by asking the subject to tell where, how, and on what basis was a particular response made. Fine judgment is necessary to place the subject's responses in a meaningful context. The use and interpretation of this test requires extensive training. Computer techniques too have been developed for analysis of data. An example of the Rorschach ink blot is given in Figure 2.4. The Thematic Perception Test (TAT). This test was developed by Morgan and Murray. It is a little more structured than the ink blot test. The test consists of 30 black and white picture cards and 1 blank card. Each picture card depicts 1 or more people in a variety of situations. Each picture is printed on a card. Some cards are used with adult males or females. Others are used with boys or girls. Still others are used in some combinations. 20 cards are appropriate for a subject, although a lesser number of cards, even 5, have also been successfully used. The cards are presented one at a time. The subject is asked to tell a story describing the situation presented in the picture, what led up to the situation, what is happening at the moment, what will happen in the future, and what the characters are feeling and thinking. A standard procedure is available for scoring TAT responses. The test has been modified for children and for the aged. Uma Chaudhary's Indian adaptation of TAT is also available. An example of a TAT card is given in Figure 2.5. Rosenzweig's Picture Frustration Study (PF Study). This test was developed by Rosenzweig to assess how people express aggression in the face of a frustrating situation. The test presents with the help of cartoon-like pictures a series of situations in which one person frustrates another, or calls attention to a frustrating condition. The subject is asked to tell what the other, frustrated person will say or do. The analysis of responses is based on the type and direction of aggression. An attempt is made to examine whether the focus is on the frustrating object, or on protection of the frustrated person, or on constructive solution of the problem. The direction of aggression may be towards the environment, towards oneself, or it may be tuned off in an attempt to gloss over or evade the situation. Parikh has adapted this test for use with the Indian population. Sentence completion test. This test makes use of a number of incomplete sentences. The starting part of the sentence is first presented and the subject has to provide an ending to the sentence. It is held that the type of endings used by the subjects reflect their attitudes, motivation and conflicts. The test provides subjects with several opportunities to reveal their underlying unconscious motivations. A few sample items of a sentence completion test are given below. 1. My father. 2. My greatest fear is. 3. The best thing about my mother is. 4. I am proud of. Draw a person test. It is a simple test in which the subject is asked to draw a person on a sheet of paper. A pencil and eraser is provided to facilitate drawing. After the completion of the drawing, the subject is generally asked to draw the figure of an opposite-sex person. Finally, the subject is asked to make a story about the person as if she or he was a character in a novel or play. Some examples of interpretations are as follows. 1. Omission of facial features suggests that the person tries to evade. 4. Highly conflict-ridden interpersonal relationship. 2. Graphic emphasis on the neck suggests lack of control over impulses. 3. Disproportionately large head suggests organic brain disease and occupation with headaches. The analysis of personality with the help of projective techniques appears fairly interesting. It helps us to understand unconscious motives, deep-rooted conflicts, and emotional complexes of an individual. However, the interpretation of the responses requires sophisticated skills and specialized training. There are problems associated with the reliability of scoring and validity of interpretations. But the practitioners have found these techniques quite useful. Behavioral analysis. A person's behavior in a variety of situations can provide us with meaningful information about her or his personality. Observation of behavior serves as the basis of behavioral analysis. An observer's report may contain data obtained from interview, observation, ratings, nomination, and situational tests. We will examine these different procedures in some detail. Interview. Interview is a commonly used method for assessing personality. This involves talking to the person being assessed and asking specific questions. Diagnostic interviewing generally involves in-depth interviewing which seeks to go beyond the replies given by the person. Interviews may be structured or unstructured depending on the purpose or goals of assessment. In unstructured interviews, the interviewer seeks to develop an impression about a person by asking a number of questions. The way a person presents himself and answers the questions carries enough potential to reveal her or his personality. The structured interviews address very specific questions and follow a set procedure. This is often done to make objective comparison of persons being interviewed. Use of rating scales may further enhance the objectivity of evaluations. Observation. Behavioral observation is another method which is very commonly used for the assessment of personality. Although all of us watch people and form impressions about their personality, use of observation for personality assessment is a sophisticated procedure that cannot be carried out by untrained people. It requires careful training of the observer, and a fairly detailed guideline about analysis of behaviors in order to assess the personality of a given person. For example, a clinical psychologist may like to observe her or his client's interaction with family members and home visitors. With carefully designed observation, the clinical psychologist may gain considerable insight into a client's personality. In spite of their frequent and widespread use, observation and interview methods are characterized by the following limitations. 1. Professional training required for collection of useful data through these methods is quite demanding and time-consuming. 2. Maturity of the psychologist is a precondition for obtaining valid data through these techniques. 3. Mere presence of the observer may contaminate the results. As a stranger, the observer may influence the behavior of the person being observed and thus not obtain good data. Behavioral ratings. Behavioral ratings are frequently used for assessment of personality in educational and industrial settings. Behavioral ratings are generally taken from people who know the assessee intimately and have interacted with her or him over a period of time or have had a chance to observe her or him. They attempt to put individuals into certain categories in terms of their behavioral qualities. The categories may involve different numbers or descriptive terms. It has been found that use of numbers or general descriptive adjectives in rating scales always creates confusion for the rater. In order to use ratings effectively, the traits should be clearly defined in terms of carefully stated behavioral anchors. The method of rating suffers from the following major limitations. 1. Raters often display certain biases that color their judgments of different traits. For example, most of us are greatly influenced by a single favorable or unfavorable trait. This often forms the basis of a rater's overall judgment of a person. This tendency is known as the halo effect. 2. Raters have a tendency to place individuals either in the middle of the scale, called middle category bias, by avoiding extreme positions, or in the extreme positions, called extreme response bias, by avoiding middle categories on the scale. These tendencies can be overcome by providing raters with appropriate training, or by developing such scales in which the response bias is likely to be small. Nomination. This method is often used in obtaining peer assessment. It can be used with persons who have been in long-term interaction and who know each other very well. In using nomination, each person is asked to choose one or more persons of the group with whom she or he would like to work, study, play, or participate in any other activity. The person may also be asked to specify the reason for her or his choices. Nominations thus received may be analyzed to understand the personality and behavioral qualities of the person. This technique has been found to be highly dependable, although it may also be affected by personal biases. Situational tests. A variety of situational tests have been devised for the assessment of personality. The most commonly used test of this kind is the situational stress test. It provides us with information about how a person behaves under stressful situations. The test requires a person to perform a given task with other persons who are instructed to be non-cooperative and interfering. The test involves a kind of role-playing. The person is instructed to play a role for which she or he is observed. A verbal report is also obtained on what she or he was asked to do. The situation may be realistic one, or it may be created through a video play. Activity 2.2. If you were asked to change one aspect of your personality, what would you like to change and why? If not, why? Which aspect of your personality would you never want to change? Write a paragraph. Discuss with a friend. Box 2.1. Personality-related terms. Temperament, biologically based characteristic way of reacting. Trait, stable, persistent and specific way of behaving. Disposition, tendency of a person to react to a given situation in a particular way. Character, the overall pattern of regularly occurring behavior. Habit, overlearned modes of behaving. Values, goals and ideals that are considered important and worthwhile to achieve. Box 2.2. 5-factor model of personality. The controversy regarding the number of basic personality traits has taken an interesting turn in recent years. Paul Costa and Robert McRae have examined all possible personality traits. The findings indicate a set of 5 factors. They are often called Big 5 factors. These factors include 1. Openness to experience. Those who score high on this factor are imaginative, curious, open to new ideas, and interested in cultural pursuits. In contrast, those who score low are rigid. 2. Extraversion. It characterizes people who are socially active, assertive, outgoing, talkative, and fun-loving. On its opposite are people who are shy. 3. Agreeableness. This factor characterizes people who are helpful, cooperative, friendly, caring, and nurturing. On the opposite are people who are hostile and self-centered. 4. Neuroticism. People who score high on this factor are emotionally unstable, anxious, worried, fearful, distressed, irritable and hypertensive. On the opposite side are people who are well-adjusted. 5. Conscientiousness. Those who score high on this factor are achievement-oriented, dependable, responsible, prudent, hardworking and self-controlled. On the opposite are people who are impulsive. This 5-factor model represents an important theoretical development in the field of personality. It has been found useful in understanding the personality profile of people across cultures. While it is consistent with the analysis of personality traits found in different languages, it is also supported by the studies of personality carried out through different methods. Hence, it is now considered to be the most promising empirical approach to the study of personality. Box 2.3. Who is a healthy person? The humanistic theorists have indicated that healthy personality lies in not mere adjustment to society. It involves a quest to know oneself deeply and to be true to one's own feelings without disguise, and to be oneself in the here and now. According to them, the healthy people share the following characteristics. 1. They become aware of themselves, their feelings, and their limits, accept themselves, and what they make of their lives is their own responsibility, have the courage to be. 2. They experience the here and now, are not trapped. 3. They do not live in the past or dwell in the future through anxious expectations and distorted defenses. Key terms. Anal stage, archetypes, cardinal traits, central traits, client-centered therapy, collective unconscious, defense mechanisms, ego, extraversion, humanistic approach, ID, ideal self, inferiority complex, introversion, latency period, libido, metaneeds, Oedipus complex, personal identity, phallic stage, projective techniques, psychodynamic approach, projection, rationalization, reaction formation, regression, repression, self-efficacy, self-esteem, self-regulation, social identity, superego, trait approach, type approach. Unconscious. Summary. 1. The study of the self and the personality helps us understand ourselves as well as others. An individual's self develops through social interaction with significant others. 2. There are different kinds of self such as personal self, social self, and relational self. Self-esteem and self-efficacy are two very important aspects of behavior, which have far-reaching consequences in our life. 3. The psychological techniques of self-regulation include systematic observation of one's behavior, self-reinforcement, and self-instruction. 4. Personality refers to psychophysical characteristics of a person that are relatively stable across situations and over time and make her or him unique. Since personality helps us in adapting to a variety of situations in our life, it is likely to change as a result of external or internal forces. 5. Personality has been studied through several approaches. The most prominent among these are typological, psychodynamic, behavioral, cultural, and humanistic approaches. 6. The typological approach attempts to describe personality in terms of a few types, which are characterized by a cluster of traits. Allport, Cattell and Eysenck have advocated a trait approach to personality, which offers a unified view of a person. 7. Freud developed psychodynamic approach and discussed personality in terms of a constant conflict between our internal forces, called it ego, and superego. In Freud's view, unconscious conflicts are rooted in the process of psychosexual development, which occurs through oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital stages. 8. Post-Freudian theorists focus on interpersonal forces and the contemporary circumstances of life of the person. Jung, Fromm, Adler, Horney and Erickson brought out the role of ego and social forces in personality. 9. The behavioral approach views personality as the response of an individual to the environment. They consider response as the structural unit of personality, which is emitted to satisfy a specific need. 10. The cultural approach attempts to comprehend personality in terms of the demands of adaptation made on individuals by the economic maintenance systems and the resulting cultural features of a group of people. 11. The humanistic approach focuses on subjective experiences of individuals and their choices. Rogers emphasized the relationship between the real self and the ideal self. The congruence of these selves makes a person fully functioning. Maslow discussed personality in terms of the interplay of needs that motivated people. The needs could be arranged in a hierarchy from lower order, survival-related, needs to higher order, development-related, needs. 12. Personality assessment refers to the procedure of analyzing and evaluating people in terms of certain psychological characteristics. The goal is to predict an individual's behavior with a high degree of accuracy. 13. An individual's personality can be assessed by using observer reports, projective techniques, and self-report measures. Observer reports include interview, observation, ratings, nomination and situational tests. Rorschach ink blot test, and thematic perception test are widely used projective tests of personality. Self-report measures attempt to assess personality by using fairly structured tests. Project ideas. We all have some notions about our ideal selves, i.e., and what we would like to be. Take time to imagine that you have achieved your ideal self. With this notion of your ideal self, express your attitudes towards these categories: at school, B, friends, C, family, and D, money. Write a paragraph on each describing your ideal attitudes. Next, write all these categories on 4 sheets of paper and ask your 2 friends and 2 family members to write about what they perceive to be your real attitudes towards these categories. These 4 persons will describe your real self as they see you. Compare your ideal descriptions with others' real descriptions in detail. Are they very similar or dissimilar? Prepare a report on this. Select 5 persons whom you most admire, either from real life or from history. Collect information about their contributions in their respective fields and identify the characteristics in their personality that have impressed you. Do you find any similarities? Prepare a comparative report. Pedagogical hints. 1. To make students understand the concept of self, certain activities could be organized, such as a student may be asked to tell about herself, himself. 2. Prepare flowcharts, diagrams to explain the concepts. Help students to prepare charts, diagrams related to concepts given in the chapter. 3. Emphasize the importance of various personality assessment techniques in different spheres of life. 4. Sample items of various tests of personality could be shown to generate interest among students. They could be asked to compare the test items included in different measures of personality. Chapter 3. Meeting Life Challenges. Contents. After reading this chapter, you would be able to understand the nature, types and sources of stress as life challenges, examine the effects of stress on psychological functioning, learn ways to cope with stress, know about the life skills that help people to stay healthy, and understand the factors that promote positive health and well-being. Introduction. Nature, types and sources of stress. A measure of stressful life events, Box 3.1. Effects of stress on psychological functioning and health. Examination. Anxiety, Box 3.2. Stress and health. General adaptation syndrome. Stress and immune system. Lifestyle. Coping with stress. Stress management techniques promoting positive health and well-being. Life skills. Resilience and health, Box 3.3. Key terms. Summary. Project idea. Pedagogical hints. Introduction. Raj has been studying for his final examination, which is going to take place tomorrow morning. He studies till 1 a.m. in the night. Unable to concentrate anymore, he sets the alarm for 6 a.m. and tries to go off to sleep. As he is very tense, he keeps tossing and turning in bed. Images flash through his mind of not being able to secure the marks he needs to opt for the subjects of his choice. He blames himself for fooling around with his friends and not preparing thoroughly for the examination. In the morning he wakes up with a heavy head, misses breakfast, and barely makes it in time to school for his examination. He opens the question paper, his heart pounding, hands clammy with sweat, and then he feels his mind has gone completely blank. Some of you may have lived through an experience such as Raj's. The challenge posed by examinations is common to all students. You are perhaps already thinking about a career. What if you are denied this choice? Will you give up? Life poses challenges all the time. Think of a child who loses her or his parents at a young age with no one to take care of her or him, a young woman who loses her husband in a car accident, parents who bring up children who are physically or mentally challenged, young girls, boys who have to spend long nights in call centers and then catch up on their sleep during the daytime. Look around yourself and you will find that life is a big challenge. All of us try to meet these challenges in our own way. Some of us succeed while others succumb to such life stresses. Life challenges are not necessarily stressful. Much depends on how a challenge is viewed. A number 11 batsman in a cricket team will view facing a fast bowler's delivery differently than would an opening batsman, who will look forward to such a challenge. It is said that one's best comes out when one is challenged. We will like to consider in this chapter how a life condition turns into a challenge or a cause of stress. Further, we will also see how people respond to various life challenges as well as stressful situations. Nature, types and sources of stress. While waiting to cross the road on a busy Monday morning, you may be temporarily stressed. But because you are alert, vigilant and aware of the danger, you are able to cross the road safely. Faced with any challenge, we put in additional efforts and mobilize all our resources and the support system to meet the challenge. All the challenges, problems, and difficult circumstances put us to stress. Thus, if handled properly, stress increases the probability of one's survival. Stress is like electricity. It gives energy, increases human arousal, and affects performance. However, if the electric current is too high, it can fuse bulbs, damage appliances, etc. High stress too can produce unpleasant effects and cause our performance to deteriorate. Conversely, too little stress may cause one to feel somewhat listless and low on motivation, which may lead us to perform slowly and less efficiently. It is important to remember that not all stress is inherently bad or destructive. Eustress is the term used to describe the level of stress that is good for you and is one of a person's best assets for achieving peak performance and managing minor crisis. Eustress, however, has the potential of turning into distress. It is this latter manifestation of stress that causes our body's wear and tear. Thus, stress can be described as the pattern of responses an organism makes to stimulus event that disturbs the equilibrium and exceeds a person's ability to cope. Nature of stress. The word stress has its origin in the Latin words strictus, meaning tight or narrow, and stringer, the verb meaning to tighten. These root words reflect the internal feelings of tightness and constriction of the muscles and breathing reported by many people under stress. Stress is often explained in terms of characteristics of the environment that are disruptive to the individual. Stressors are events that cause our body to give the stress response. Such events include noise, crowding, a bad relationship, or the daily commuting to school or office. The reaction to external stressors is called strains, see Figure 3.1. Stress has come to be associated with both the causes as well as effects. However, this view of stress can cause confusion. Hans Selye, the father of modern stress research, defined stress as the non-specific response of the body to any demand, that is, regardless of the cause of the threat, the individual will respond with the same physiological pattern of reactions. Many researchers do not agree with this definition, as they feel that the stress response is not nearly as general and non-specific as Selye suggests. Different stressors may produce somewhat different patterns of stress reaction, and different individuals may have different characteristic modes of response. You may recall the case of an opening batsman mentioned earlier. Each one of us will see the situation through our own eyes, and it is our perception of the demands, and our ability to meet them, which will determine whether we are feeling stressed or not. Stress is not a factor that resides in the individual or the environment, instead it is embedded in an ongoing process that involves individuals transacting with their social and cultural environments, making appraisals of those encounters and attempting to cope with the issues that arise. Stress is a dynamic mental, cognitive state. It is a disruption in homeostasis or an imbalance that gives rise to a requirement for resolution of that imbalance or restoration of homeostasis. The perception of stress is dependent upon the individual's cognitive appraisal of events and the resources available to deal with them. The stress process, based on the cognitive theory of stress propounded by Lazarus and his colleagues, is described in Figure 3.2. An individual's response to a stressful situation largely depends upon the perceived events and how they are interpreted or appraised. Lazarus has distinguished between two types of appraisal, i.e., primary and secondary. Primary appraisal refers to the perception of a new or changing environment as positive, neutral, or negative in its consequences. Negative events are appraised for their possible harm, threat, or challenge. Harm is the assessment of the damage that has already been done by an event. Threat is the assessment of possible future damage that may be brought about by the event. Challenge appraisals are associated with more confident expectations of the ability to cope with the stressful event, the potential to overcome and even profit from the event. When we perceive an event as stressful, we are likely to make a secondary appraisal, which is the assessment of one's coping abilities and resources and whether they will be sufficient to meet the harm, threat, or challenge of the event. These resources may be mental, physical, personal, or social. If one thinks one has a positive attitude, health, skills, and social support to deal with the crises, she or he will feel less stressed. This two-level appraisal process determines not only our cognitive and behavioral responses but also our emotional and physiological responses to external events. These appraisals are very subjective and will depend on many factors. One factor is the past experience of dealing with such a stressful condition. If one has handled similar situations very successfully in the past, they would be less threatening for her or him. Another factor is whether the stressful event is perceived as controllable, i.e., whether one has mastery or control over a situation. A person who believes that she or he can control the onset of a negative situation, or its adverse consequences, will experience less amount of stress than those who have no such sense of personal control. For example, a sense of self-confidence or efficacy can determine whether the person is likely to appraise the situation as a threat or a challenge. Thus, the experience and outcome of a stressor may vary from individual to individual. Stress includes all those environmental and personal events which challenge or threaten the well-being of a person. These stressors can be external, such as environmental, noise, air pollution, social, breakup with a friend, loneliness, or psychological, conflict, frustration, within the individual. Very often, these stressors result in a variety of stress reactions, which may be physiological, behavioral, emotional, and cognitive. See Figure 3.2. At the physiological level, arousal plays a key role in stress-related behaviors. The hypothalamus initiates action along two pathways. The first pathway involves the autonomic nervous system. The adrenal gland releases large amount of catecholamines, epinephrine and norepinephrine, into the bloodstream. This leads to physiological changes seen in fight or flight response. The second pathway involves the pituitary gland, which secretes the corticosteroid cortisol, which provides energy. The emotional reactions to experience of stress include negative emotions such as fear, anxiety, embarrassment, anger, depression, or even denial. The behavioral responses are virtually limitless, depending on the nature of the stressful event. Confrontative action against the stressor, fight, or withdrawal from the threatening event. Flight are two general categories of behavioral responses. Cognitive responses include beliefs about the harm or threat an event poses and beliefs about its causes or controllability. These include responses such as inability to concentrate, and intrusive, repetitive or morbid thoughts. As indicated in Figure 3.2, the stresses which people experience also vary in terms of intensity, low intensity versus high intensity, duration, short-term versus long-term, complexity, less complex versus more complex, and predictability, unexpected versus predictable. The outcome of stress depends on the position of a particular stressful experience along these dimensions. Usually more intense, prolonged or chronic, complex and unanticipated stresses have more negative consequences than have less intense, short-term, less complex and expected stresses. An individual's experiences of stress depend on the physiological strength of that person. Thus, individuals with poor physical health and weak constitution would be more vulnerable than would be those who enjoy good health and strong constitution. Psychological characteristics like mental health, temperament, and self-concept are relevant to the experience of stress. The cultural context in which we live determines the meaning of any event and defines the nature of response that is expected under various conditions. Finally, the stress experience will be determined by the resources of the person, such as money, social skills, coping style, support networks, etc. All these factors determine the appraisal of a given stressful situation. Signs and symptoms of stress. The way we respond to stress varies depending upon our personality, early upbringing, and life experiences. Everyone has their own pattern of stress response. So the warning signs may vary, as may their intensity. Some of us know our pattern of stress response and can gauge the depth of the problem by the nature and severity of our own symptoms or changes in behavior. These symptoms of stress can be physical, emotional, and behavioral. Any of the symptoms can indicate a degree of stress which, if left unresolved, might have serious implications. Activity 3.1. Read the following signs of stress. lack of concentration, memory loss, poor decision-making, inconsistency, irregular attendance and timekeeping, low self-esteem, poor long-term planning, frantic bursts of energy, extreme mood swings, emotional outbursts, worry, anxiety, fear, depression, difficulties with sleep, difficulties with eating, misuse of drugs, physical illness, e.g. stomach upset, headache, backache, etc. Tick those applicable to you and then discuss in groups of 2 or 3 students in class. Can you reduce some of them? Discuss how. Consult your teacher. Types of stress. The 3 major types of stress, viz. Physical and environmental, psychological, and social, are listed in Figure 3.2. It is important to understand that all these types of stress are interrelated. Physical and environmental stress. Physical stresses are demands that change the state of our body. We feel strained when we overexert ourselves physically, lack a nutritious diet, suffer an injury, or fail to get enough sleep. Environmental stresses are aspects of our surroundings that are often unavoidable, such as air pollution, crowding, noise, heat of the summer, winter cold, etc. Another group of environmental stresses are catastrophic events or disasters such as fire, earthquake, floods, etc. Psychological stress. These are stresses that we generate ourselves in our minds. These are personal and unique to the person experiencing them and are internal sources of stress. We worry about problems, feel anxiety, or become depressed. These are not only symptoms of stress, but they cause further stress for us. Some of the important sources of psychological stress are frustration, conflicts, internal and social pressures, etc. Frustration results from the blocking of needs and motives by something or someone that hinders us from achieving a desired goal. There could be a number of causes of frustration, such as social discrimination, interpersonal hurt, low grades in school, etc. Conflicts may occur between 2 or more incompatible needs or motives, e.g. whether to study dance or psychology. You may want to continue studies or take up a job. There may be a conflict of values when you are pressurized to take any action that may be against the values held by you. Internal pressures stem from beliefs based upon expectations from inside us to ourselves, such as, I must do everything perfectly. Such expectations can only lead to disappointment. Many of us drive ourselves ruthlessly towards achieving unrealistically high standards in achieving our goals. Social pressures may be brought about from people who make excessive demands on us. This can cause even greater pressure when we have to work with them. Also, there are people with whom we face interpersonal difficulties, a personality clash, of sorts. Social stress. These are induced externally and result from our interaction with other people. Social events like death or illness in the family, strained relationships, trouble with neighbors are some examples of social stresses. These social stresses vary widely from person to person. Attending parties may be stressful for a person who likes to spend quiet evenings at home, while an outgoing person may find staying at home in the evenings stressful. Sources of stress. A wide range of events and conditions can generate stress. Among the most important of these are major stressful life events, such as death of a loved one or personal. Box 3.1. Injury, the annoying frequent hassles of everyday life and traumatic events that affect our lives. Life events. Changes, both big and small, sudden and gradual, affect our life from the moment we are born. We learn to cope with small, everyday changes, but major life events can be stressful, because they disturb our routine and cause upheaval. If several of these life events that are planned, e.g. moving into a new house, or unpredicted, e.g. breakup of a long-term relationship, occur within a short period of time, we find it difficult to cope with them and will be more prone to the symptoms of stress. A measure of stressful life events. Holmes and Rahe developed a life event measure of stress. A measure of stressful life events based on the above scale, known as the Presumptive Stressful Life Events Scale, has been developed for the Indian population by Singh, Kaur and Kaur. It is a self-rating questionnaire made up of 51 life changes, which a person may have experienced. Each of these life events is assigned a numerical value in terms of their severity. For example, the death of one's spouse is assigned 95, personal illness or injury 56, failure in examination 43, appearing for examination or interview 43, change in sleeping habits 33, as the mean stress score. Both positive and negative events are taken, believing that both kinds of changes cause stress. The respondent's stress score is the weighted sum of all the items, life change events in the past 1 year checked by her or him. Some sample items of the measure are: life events, mean stress score, death of a close family member, 66, unexpected accident or trauma, 53, illness of a family member, 52, breakup with friend, 47, appearing for examinations, 43, change in eating habits, 27, the mean number of stressful life events experienced over a period of 1 year without producing overt physical or mental illness is approximately 2. However, the correlations between life events and susceptibility to any particular illness is low, indicating a weak association between life events and stress. It has been argued as to whether life events have caused some stress-related illness or whether stress caused the life events and illness. The impact of most life events varies from person to person. Factors such as age at which the event was first experienced, frequency of occurrence, duration of the stressful event, and social support must be studied in evaluating the relationship between stressful life events and the subsequent illness episode. Hassles. These are the personal stresses we endure as individuals, due to the happenings in our daily life, such as noisy surroundings, commuting, quarrelsome neighbors, electricity and water shortage, traffic snarls, and so on. Attending to various emergencies are daily hassles experienced by a housewife. There are some jobs in which daily hassles are very frequent. These daily hassles may sometimes have devastating consequences for the individual, who is often the one coping alone with them, as others may not even be aware of them as outsiders. The more stress people report as a result of daily hassles, the poorer is their psychological well-being. Traumatic events. These include being involved in a variety of extreme events such as a fire, train or road accident, robbery, earthquake, tsunami, etc. The effects of these events may occur after some lapse of time and sometimes persist as symptoms of anxiety, flashbacks, dreams and intrusive thoughts, etc. Severe trauma can also strain relationships. Professional help will be needed to cope with them, especially if they persist for many months after the event is over. Activity 3.2. Identify the stressful events, which you and 2 of your classmates have experienced in the past 1 year. List the stressful events and rank them from 1 to 5 that have had negative impact in your day-to-day functioning. Then select those that are common to all 3 of you. Find out how much ability, skill, and family support your friends and you have in order to deal with each of these stresses. Discuss these results with your teacher. Effects of stress on psychological functioning and health. What are the effects of stress? Many of the effects are physiological in nature, however, other changes also occur inside stressed individuals. There are 4 major effects of stress associated with the stressed state, viz. Emotional, physiological, cognitive, and behavioral. Emotional effects. Those who suffer from stress are far more likely to experience mood swings, and show erratic behavior that may alienate them from family and friends. In some cases, this can start a vicious circle of decreasing confidence, leading to more serious emotional problems. Some examples are feelings of anxiety and depression, increased physical tension, increased psychological tension, and mood swings. Box 3.2 presents the phenomenon of examination anxiety. Physiological effects. When the human body is placed under physical or psychological stress, it increases the production of certain hormones, such as adrenaline and cortisol. These hormones produce marked changes in heart rate, blood pressure levels, metabolism, and physical activity. Although this physical reaction will help us to function more effectively when we are under pressure for short periods of time, it can be extremely damaging to the body in the long-term effects. Examples of physiological effects are release of epinephrine and norepinephrine, slowing down of the digestive system, expansion of air passages in the lungs, increased heart rate, and constriction of blood vessels. Cognitive effects. If pressures due to stress continue, one may suffer from mental overload. This suffering from high level of stress can rapidly cause individuals to lose their ability to make sound decisions. Faulty decisions made at home, in career, or at workplace may lead to arguments, failure, financial loss, or even loss of job. Cognitive effects of stress are poor concentration and reduced short-term memory capacity. Behavioral effects. Stress affects our behavior in the form of eating less nutritional food, increasing intake of stimulants such as caffeine, excessive consumption of cigarettes, alcohol, and other drugs such as tranquilizers, etc. Tranquilizers can be addictive and have side effects such as loss of concentration, poor coordination, and dizziness. Some of the typical behavioral effects of stress seen are disrupted sleep patterns, increased absenteeism, and reduced work performance. Stress and health. You must have often observed that many of your friends, maybe including yourself as well, fall sick during the examination time. They suffer from stomach upsets, body aches, nausea, diarrhea, and fever, etc. You must have also noticed that people who are unhappy in their personal lives fall sick more often than those who are happy and enjoy life. Chronic daily stress can divert an individual's attention from caring for herself or himself. When stress is prolonged, it affects physical health and impairs psychological functioning. People experience exhaustion and attitudinal problems when the stress due to demands from the environment and constraints are too high and little support is available from family and friends. The physical exhaustion is seen in the signs of chronic fatigue, weakness, and low energy. The mental exhaustion appears in the form of irritability, anxiety, feelings of helplessness, and hopelessness. This state of physical, emotional, and psychological exhaustion is known as burnout. There is also convincing evidence to show that stress can produce changes in the immune system and increase the chances of someone becoming ill. Stress has been implicated in the development of cardiovascular disorders, high blood pressure, as well as psychosomatic disorders including ulcers, asthma, allergies, and headaches. Researchers estimate that stress plays an important role in 50 to 70% of all physical illnesses. Studies also reveal that 60% of medical visits are primarily for stress-related symptoms. General adaptation syndrome. What happens to the body when stress is prolonged? Selly studied this issue by subjecting animals to a variety of stressors such as high temperature, X-rays, and insulin injections, in the laboratory over a long period of time. He also observed patients with various injuries and illnesses in hospitals. Selly noticed a similar pattern of bodily response in all of them. He called this pattern the general adaptation syndrome, GAS. According to him, GAS involves 3 stages: alarm reaction, resistance, and exhaustion. See Figure 3.3. 1. Alarm reaction stage. The presence of a noxious stimulus or stressor leads to activation of the adrenal pituitary cortex system. This triggers the release of hormones producing the stress response. Now the individual is ready for fight or flight. 2. Resistance stage. If stress is prolonged, the resistance stage begins. The parasympathetic nervous system calls for more cautious use of the body's resources. The organism makes efforts to cope with the threat, as through confrontation. 3. Exhaustion stage. Continued exposure to the same stressor or additional stressors drains the body of its resources and leads to the 3rd stage of exhaustion. The physiological systems involved in alarm reaction and resistance become ineffective, and susceptibility to stress-related diseases such as high blood pressure becomes more likely. Sela's model has been criticized for assigning a very limited role to psychological factors in stress. Researchers have reported that the psychological appraisal of events is important for the determination of stress. How people respond to stress is substantially influenced by their perceptions, personalities, and biological constitutions. Stress and the immune system. Stress can cause illness by impairing the workings of the immune system. The immune system guards the body against attackers, both from within and outside. Psychoneuroimmunology focuses on the links between the mind, the brain, and the immune system. It studies the effects of stress on the immune system. How does the immune system work? The white blood cells, leukocytes within the immune system identify and destroy foreign bodies. Antigens, such as viruses. It also leads to the production of antibodies. There are several kinds of white blood cells or leukocytes within the immune system, including T cells, B cells and natural killer cells. T cells destroy invaders, and T helper cells increase immunological activity. It is these T helper cells that are attacked by the human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, the virus causing acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, AIDS. B cells produce antibodies. Natural killer cells are involved in the fight against both viruses and tumors. Stress can affect natural killer cell cytotoxicity, which is of major importance in the defense against various infections and cancer. Reduced levels of natural killer cell cytotoxicity have been found in people who are highly stressed, including students facing important examinations, bereaved persons, and those who are severely depressed. Studies reveal that immune functioning is better in individuals receiving social support. Also, changes in the immune system will have more effect on health among those whose immune systems are already weakened. Figure 3.4 depicts this sequence comprising negative emotions, release of stress hormones which lead to weakening of the immune system, thereby affecting mental and physical health. Psychological stress is accompanied by negative emotions and associated behaviors, including depression, hostility, anger and aggression. Negative emotion states are of particular concern to the study of effects of stress on health. The incidence of psychological disorders, such as panic attacks and obsessive behavior, increases with the build-up of long-term stress. Worries can reach such a level that they surface as a frightening, painful physical sensation, which can be mistaken for a heart attack. People under prolonged stress are more prone to irrational fears, mood swings and phobias, and may experience fits of depression, anger and irritability. These negative emotions appear to be related to the function of the immune system. Our ability to interpret our world and to invest that interpretation with personal meaning and emotion have a powerful and direct effect on the body. Negative moods have been associated with poorer health outcomes. Feelings of hopelessness are related to worsening of disease, increased risk of injury and death due to various causes. Lifestyle. Stress can lead to unhealthy lifestyle or health-damaging behavior. Lifestyle is the overall pattern of decisions and behaviors that determine a person's health and quality of life. Stressed individuals may be more likely to expose themselves to pathogens, which are agents causing physical illness. People who are stressed have poor nutritional habits, sleep less and are likely to engage in other health-risking behaviors like smoking and alcohol abuse. Such health-impairing behaviors develop gradually and are accompanied by pleasant experiences temporarily. However, we tend to ignore their long-term damaging effects and underestimate the risk they pose to our lives. Studies have revealed that health-promoting behavior like balanced diet, regular exercise, family support, etc., play an important role in good health. Adhering to a lifestyle that includes balanced low-fat diet, regular exercise and continued activity along with positive thinking enhances health and longevity. The modern lifestyle of excesses in eating, drinking and the so-called fast-paced good life has led to violation of basic principles of health in some of us, as to what we eat, think or do with our lives. Coping with stress. In recent years the conviction has grown that it is how we cope with stress and not the stress one experiences that influences our psychological well-being, social functioning and health. Coping is a dynamic situation-specific reaction to stress. It is a set of concrete responses to stressful situations or events that are intended to resolve the problem and reduce stress. The way we cope with stress often depends on rigid deep-seated beliefs, based on experience, e.g. when caught in a traffic jam we feel angry, because we believe that the traffic should move faster. To manage stress we often need to reassess the way we think and learn coping strategies. People who cope poorly with stress have an impaired immune response and diminished activity of natural killer cells. Individuals show consistent individual differences in the coping strategies they use to handle stressful situations. These can include both overt and covert activities. The three coping strategies given by Endler and Parker are Task-oriented strategy. This involves obtaining information about the stressful situation and about alternative courses of action and their probable outcome. It also involves deciding priorities and acting so as to deal directly with the stressful situation. For example, schedule my time better, or think about how I have solved similar problems. Emotion-oriented strategy. This can involve efforts to maintain hope and to control one's emotions. It can also involve venting feelings of anger and frustration, or deciding that nothing can be done to change things. For example, tell myself that it is not really happening to me, or worry about what I am going to do. Avoidance-oriented strategy. This involves denying or minimizing the seriousness of the situation. It also involves conscious suppression of stressful thoughts and their replacement by self-protective thoughts. Examples of this are watching TV, phone up a friend, or try to be with other people. Lazarus and Folkman has conceptualized coping as a dynamic process rather than an individual trait. Coping refers to constantly changing cognitive and behavioral efforts to master, reduce or tolerate the internal or external demands that are created by the stressful transaction. Coping serves to allow the individual to manage or alter a problem and regulate the emotional response to that problem. According to them, coping responses can be divided into two types of responses: problem-focused and emotion-focused. Problem-focused strategies attack the problem itself, with behaviors designed to gain information, to alter the event, and to alter belief and commitments. They increase the person's awareness, level of knowledge, and range of behavioral and cognitive coping options. They can act to reduce the threat value of the event. For example, I made a plan of action and followed it. Emotion-focused strategies call for psychological changes designed primarily to limit the degree of emotional disruption caused by an event, with minimal effort to alter the event itself. For example, I did some things to let it out of my system. While both problem-focused and emotion-focused coping are necessary when facing stressful situations, research suggests that people generally tend to use the former more often than the latter. Stress management techniques. Stress is a silent killer. It is estimated to play a significant role in physical illness and disease. Hypertension, heart disease, ulcers, diabetes, and even cancer are linked to stress. Due to lifestyle changes, stress is on the increase. Therefore, schools, other institutions, offices, and communities are concerned about knowing techniques to manage stress. Some of these techniques are relaxation techniques. It is an active skill that reduces symptoms of stress and decreases the incidence of illnesses such as high blood pressure and heart disease. Usually, relaxation starts from the lower part of the body and progresses up to the facial muscles in such a way that the whole body is relaxed. Deep breathing is used along with muscle relaxation to calm the mind and relax the body. Meditation procedures. The yogic method of meditation consists of a sequence of learned techniques for refocusing of attention that brings about an altered state of consciousness. It involves such a thorough concentration that the meditator becomes unaware of any outside stimulation and reaches a different state of consciousness. Biofeedback. It is a procedure to monitor and reduce the physiological aspects of stress by providing feedback about current physiological activity and is often accompanied by relaxation training. Biofeedback training involves 3 stages: developing an awareness of the particular physiological response, e.g. heart rate, learning ways of controlling that physiological response in quiet conditions, and transferring that control into the conditions of everyday life. Creative visualization. It is an effective technique for dealing with stress. Creative visualization is a subjective experience that uses imagery and imagination. Before visualizing, one must set oneself a realistic goal, as it helps build confidence. It is easier to visualize if one's mind is quiet, body relaxed, and eyes are closed. This reduces the risk of interference from unbidden thoughts and provides the creative energy needed for turning an imagined scene into reality. Cognitive behavioral techniques. These techniques aim to inoculate people against stress. Stress inoculation training is one effective method developed by Meichenbaum. The essence of this approach is to replace negative and irrational thoughts with positive and rational ones. There are three main phases in this: assessment, stress reduction techniques, and application and follow-through. Assessment involves discussing the nature of the problem and seeing it from the viewpoint of the person, client. Stress reduction involves learning the techniques of reducing stress such as relaxation and self-instruction. Exercise can provide an active outlet for the physiological arousal experienced in response to stress. Regular exercise improves the efficiency of the heart, enhances the function of the lungs, maintains good circulation, lowers blood pressure, reduces fat in the blood, and improves the body's immune system. Swimming, walking, running, cycling, skipping, etc. help to reduce stress. One must practice these exercises at least 4 times a week for 30 minutes at a time. Each session must have a warm-up, exercise, and cool-down phases. Promoting positive health and well-being. It is unlikely that we will go through life without some experience of personal crises causing acute pressure for a while. Many people sail through and rebuild their lives very positively. They are likely to have constructive attitudes and also have lots of emotional and social support of various kinds available to them. When we find ways of managing these pressures and can use the energy to create something positive out of the situation, then we will have learned to survive healthily, and this will leave us more stress-fit for future crises. It is like being immunized against the dangers of unhealthy stress. Stress-resistant personality. Recent studies by Kobasa have shown that people with high levels of stress but low levels of illness share 3 characteristics, which are referred to as the personality traits of hardiness. It consists of the 3 C's, i.e., commitment, control, and challenge. Hardiness is a set of beliefs about oneself, the world, and how they interact. It takes shape as a sense of personal commitment to what you are doing, a sense of control over your life, and a feeling of challenge. Stress-resistant personalities have control, which is a sense of purpose and direction in life, commitment to work, family, hobbies, and social life, and challenge, that is, they see changes in life as normal and positive rather than as a threat. Everyone does not have these characteristics. Many of us have to relearn specific life skills in areas such as rational thinking and assertiveness to equip ourselves better to cope with the demands of everyday life, etc. Life skills. Life skills are abilities for adaptive and positive behavior that enable individuals to deal effectively with the demands and challenges of everyday life. Our ability to cope depends on how well we are prepared to deal with and counterbalance everyday demands, and keep equilibrium in our lives. These life skills can be learned and even improved upon. Assertiveness, time management, rational thinking, improving relationships, self-care, and overcoming unhelpful habits such as perfectionism, procrastination, etc. are some life skills that will help to meet the challenges of life. Assertiveness. Assertiveness is a behavior or skill that helps to communicate clearly and confidently our feelings, needs, wants, and thoughts. It is the ability to say no to a request, to state an opinion without being self-conscious, or to express emotions such as love, anger, etc. openly. If you are assertive, you feel confident, and have high self-esteem and a solid sense of your own identity. Time management. The way you spend your time determines the quality of your life. Learning how to plan time and delegate can help to relieve the pressure. The major way to reduce time stress is to change one's perception of time. The central principle of time management is to spend your time doing the things that you value, or that help you to achieve your goals. It depends on being realistic about what you know and that you must do it within a certain time period, knowing what you want to do, and organizing your life to achieve a balance between the two. Rational thinking. Many stress-related problems occur as a result of distorted thinking. The way you think and the way you feel are closely connected. When we are stressed, we have an inbuilt selective bias to attend to negative thoughts and images from the past, which affect our perception of the present and the future. Some of the principles of rational thinking are challenging your distorted thinking and irrational beliefs, driving out potentially intrusive negative anxiety-provoking thoughts, and making positive statements. Improving relationships. The key to a sound, lasting relationship is communication. This consists of 3 essential skills: listening to what the other person is saying, expressing how you feel and what you think, and accepting the other person's opinions and feelings, even if they are different from your own. It also requires us to avoid misplaced jealousy and sulking behavior. Self-care: if we keep ourselves healthy, fit and relaxed, we are better prepared physically and emotionally to tackle the stresses of everyday life. Our breathing patterns reflect our state of mind and emotions. When we are stressed or anxious, we tend towards rapid and shallow breathing from high in the chest, with frequent sighs. The most relaxed breathing is slow, stomach-centered breathing from the diaphragm, i.e. a dome-like muscle between the chest and the abdominal cavity. Environmental stresses like noise, pollution, space, light, color, etc. can all exert an influence on our mood. These have a noticeable effect on our ability to cope with stress and well-being. Overcoming unhelpful habits such as perfectionism, avoidance, procrastination, etc. are strategies that help to cope in the short term but which make one more vulnerable to stress. Perfectionists are persons who have to get everything just right. They have difficulty in varying standards according to factors such as time available, consequences of not being able to stop work, and the effort needed. They are more likely to feel tense and find it difficult to relax, are critical of self and others, and may become inclined to avoid challenges. Avoidance is to put the issue under the carpet and refuse to accept or face it. Procrastination means putting off what we know we need to do. We all are guilty of saying, "I will do it later." People who procrastinate are deliberately avoiding confronting their fears of failure or rejection. Various factors have been identified which facilitate the development of positive health. Health is a state of complete physical, mental, social and spiritual well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. Positive health comprises the following constructs: a healthy body, high quality of personal relationships, a sense of purpose in life, self-regard, mastery of life's tasks, and resilience to stress, trauma, and change. Box 3.3 presents the relationship between resilience and health. Specifically, factors that act as stress buffers and facilitate positive health are diet, exercise, positive attitude, positive thinking, and social support. Diet: a balanced diet can lift one's mood, give more energy, feed muscles, improve circulation, prevent illness, strengthen the immune system and make one feel better to cope with stresses of life. The key to healthy living is to eat 3 main meals a day, and eat a varied, well-balanced diet. How much nutrition one needs depends on one's activity level, genetic makeup, climate, and health history. What people eat, and how much do they weigh involve behavioral processes. Some people are able to maintain a healthy diet and weight while others become obese. When we are stressed, we seek comfort foods, which are high in fats, salt and sugar. Exercise: a large number of studies confirm a consistently positive relationship between physical fitness and health. Also, of all the measures an individual can take to improve health, exercise is the lifestyle change with the widest popular approval. Regular exercise plays an important role in managing weight and stress, and is shown to have a positive effect on reducing tension, anxiety and depression. Physical exercises that are essential for good health are stretching exercises such as yogic asanas and aerobic exercises such as jogging, swimming, cycling, etc. Whereas stretching exercises have a calming effect, aerobic exercises increase the arousal level of the body. The health benefits of exercise work as a stress buffer. Studies suggest that fitness permits individuals to maintain general mental and physical well-being even in the face of negative life events. Positive attitude: positive health and well-being can be realized by having a positive attitude. Some of the factors leading to a positive attitude are having a fairly accurate perception of reality, a sense of purpose in life and responsibility, acceptance and tolerance for different viewpoints of others, and taking credit for success and accepting blame for failure. Finally, being open to new ideas and having a sense of humor with the ability to laugh at oneself help us to remain centered, and see things in a proper perspective. Positive thinking: the power of positive thinking has been increasingly recognized in reducing and coping with stress. Optimism, which is the inclination to expect favorable life outcomes, has been linked to psychological and physical well-being. People differ in the manner in which they cope. For example, optimists tend to assume that adversity can be handled successfully, whereas pessimists anticipate disasters. Optimists use more problem-focused coping strategies, and seek advice and help from others. Pessimists ignore the problem or source of stress, and use strategies such as giving up the goal with which stress is interfering or denying that stress exists. Social support. Social support is defined as the existence and availability of people on whom we can rely upon, people who let us know that they care about, value, and love us. Someone who believes that she or he belongs to a social network of communication and mutual obligation experiences social support. Perceived support, i.e., the quality of social support is positively related to health and well-being, whereas social network, i.e., the quantity of social support is unrelated to well-being, because it is very time-consuming and demanding to maintain a large social network. Studies have revealed that women exposed to life event stresses, who had a close friend, were less likely to be depressed and had lesser medical complications during pregnancy. Social support can help to provide protection against stress. People with high levels of social support from family and friends may experience less stress when they confront a stressful experience, and they may cope with it more successfully. Social support may be in the form of tangible support or assistance involving material aid, such as money, goods, services, etc. For example, a child gives notes to her or his friend, since she or he was absent from school due to sickness. Family and friends also provide informational support about stressful events. For example, a student facing a stressful event such as a difficult board examination, if provided information by a friend who has faced a similar one, would not only be able to identify the exact procedures involved, but also it would facilitate in determining what resources and coping strategies could be useful to successfully pass the examination. During times of stress, one may experience sadness, anxiety, and loss of self-esteem. Supportive friends and family provide emotional support by reassuring the individual that she or he is loved, valued, and cared for. Research has demonstrated that social support effectively reduces psychological distress such as depression or anxiety during times of stress. There is growing evidence that social support is positively related to psychological well-being. Generally, social support leads to mental health benefits for both the giver and the receiver. Activity 3.5. Identify a child in your neighborhood who had undergone some major stress in life, such as a serious accident or been through a recent traumatic experience like a robbery, fire, etc. Talk to the child and family. Can you identify some factors that have helped her or him to cope and overcome the trauma? Do you see any similar factors in your own life? Discuss with your teacher. Activity 3.3. Respond to the following items on a 5-point scale ranging from 5 equals always to 1 equals never. I express emotions openly and directly. I work towards my own personal goals. I accept situations that cannot be altered. I discuss my worries with friends. I may not get everything just right. Discuss your answers with your classmates and teacher. The higher the score, the better would be your ability to cope. Activity 3.4. Which of the following coping behaviors are problem-focused? Why? Discussing your problem with a friend. Feeling sorry for failing in an examination. Finding fault with classmates for poor marks in tests. Hiding examination results from parents. Blaming friends for bad habits. Reading essential books for the annual examination. Making efforts to improve one's performance after a setback. Missing school when assignments not completed. Discuss the answers with your classmates and teacher. Box 3.2. Examination anxiety. Examination anxiety is a fairly common phenomenon that involves feelings of tension or uneasiness that occur before, during, or after an examination. Many people experience feelings of anxiety around examinations and find it helpful in some ways, as it can be motivating and create the pressure that is needed to stay focused on one's performance. Examination nerves, worry, or fear of failure are normal for even the most talented student. However, stress of formal examination results in such high degrees of anxiety in some students that they are unable to perform at a level which matches the potential they have shown in less stressful classroom situations. Examination stress has been characterized as evaluative apprehension, or evaluative stress, and produces debilitating behavioral, cognitive, and physiological effects no different from those produced by any other stressor. High stress can interfere with the student's preparation, concentration, and performance. Examination stress can cause test anxiety, which adversely affects test performance. Persons who are high in test anxiety tend to perceive evaluative situations as personally threatening. In test situations, they are often tense, apprehensive, nervous, and emotionally aroused. Moreover, the negative self-centered cognitions which they experience distract their attention and interfere with concentration during examinations. High-test anxious students respond to examination stress with intense emotional reactions, negative thoughts about themselves, feelings of inadequacy, helplessness, and loss of status and esteem that impair their performance. Generally, the highest anxious person, instead of plunging into a task, plunges inward, that is, either neglects or misinterprets informational cues that may be readily available to her or him, or experiences attentional blocks. While preparing for examinations, one must spend enough time for study, overview, and weigh one's strengths and weaknesses, discuss difficulties with teachers and classmates, plan a revision timetable, condense notes, space out revision periods, and most importantly on the examination day concentrate on staying calm. Box 3.2. Resilience and health. In recent years, there has been a lot of research in understanding resilience in children and adolescents. Resilience is a dynamic developmental process referring to the maintenance of positive adjustment under challenging life conditions. It has been described as the capacity to bounce back in the face of stress and adversity. Resilience has been conceptualized as reflecting feelings of self-worth and self-confidence, autonomy and self-reliance, finding positive role models, seeking a confidant, cognitive skills such as problem-solving, creativity, resourcefulness, and flexibility, and a belief that one's life has purpose and meaning. Resilient individuals are able to overcome the effects of trauma, stress, and adversity and learn to live psychologically healthy and meaningful lives. Resilience has recently been defined in terms of three resources. I have social and interpersonal strengths, i.e., people around me I trust and who love me no matter what. I am inner strengths, i.e., respectful of myself and others, and I can interpersonal and problem-solving skills, i.e., find ways to solve problems I face. For a child to be resilient, she or he needs to have more than one of these strengths. For example, children may have plenty of self-esteem, I am, but may lack anyone whom they can turn to for support, I have, and do not have the capacity to solve problems, I can, will not be resilient. Outcomes of longitudinal studies of children provide evidence that in spite of extreme vulnerabilities related to poverty and other social disadvantages, many individuals develop into capable and caring adults. Key terms: alarm reaction, appraisal, coping, exhaustion, general adaptation syndrome, hardiness, homeostasis, life skills, optimism, positive health, psychoneuroimmunology, resilience, social support, stress, stressors. Summary. 1. Stress is a part of life. Stress is neither a stimulus nor a response but an ongoing transactional process between the individual and the environment. 2. There are three major types of stresses: physical and environmental, psychological and social. Sources of stress are life events, everyday hassles, traumatic events. The response to stress is emotional, physiological, cognitive and behavioral. 3. Coping is a dynamic situation-specific individual reaction to stress. There are three main types of coping: task-oriented, emotion-oriented, and avoidance-oriented coping. Coping responses may be problem-focused or emotion-focused. Problem-focused coping focuses to alter the environment and acts to reduce the threat value of the event. Emotion-focused coping are strategies for changing emotions and aim to limit the degree of emotional disruption caused by the event. 4. It is essential to have a healthy lifestyle for handling stress and effective coping. Assertiveness, time management, rational thinking, improving relationships, self-care, and overcoming unhelpful habits are life skills that help us to meet life's challenges. 5. Positive health and well-being come through balanced diet, exercise, positive attitude, positive optimistic thinking, and social support. There is also a need for overall harmonious conditions in society. We must avoid taking unhealthy escape routes of smoking, alcohol, drugs, and other harmful behaviors. Project ideas. Record the stresses in the lives of 5 to 10 teenagers. Are these different for girls and boys? Find out the ways by which they cope with them. Discuss with your parents and grandparents the unique stressors they face in their lives and how they cope with them. Pedagogical hints. 1. It is important to make students realize that stress is an integral part of life. They must, therefore, be encouraged to recognize the signs of stress in themselves and in others. 2. Students could brainstorm for possible ways of dealing with different types of stressors. 3. Drawing examples from students' lives, they need to be made to understand the harmful effects of stress on physical and mental health. 4. Students should be encouraged to search for literature in newspapers, magazines, internet, etc., suggesting ways of dealing with stress. This could be followed by discussion in the classroom. Chapter 4. Psychological disorders. After reading this chapter, you would be able to understand the basic issues in abnormal behavior and the criteria used to identify such behaviors, appreciate the factors which cause abnormal behavior, explain the different models of abnormal behavior, and describe the major psychological disorders. Contents. Introduction. Concepts of abnormality and psychological disorders. Classification of psychological disorders. Factors underlying abnormal behavior.